All right, we're about to dive into one of the most famous passages in the entire Bible, the Sermon on the Mount. But we're going to look at it through a completely different lens. This explainer is all about unpacking a pretty unconventional interpretation of Matthew 6 that, honestly, it might just change the way you see the whole thing.
So let's just jump right in with a question that gets to the heart of it all. Could there be a hidden inconsistency, a logical hiccup, in one of the most analyzed speeches in all of history? Something that maybe we've all been overlooking for centuries? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today.
And, it really is a puzzle because what we have are these verses sitting right next to each other that follow the exact same pattern, but for some reason, they're often explained in two totally different ways. So let's break down this first piece of the puzzle.
Now, take a look at the structure here. This is what's so fascinating. You see the parallels, right? For both giving to the poor and for praying, there's a command on how not to do it, and then it's immediately followed by a comparison to a group you're not supposed to imitate. The grammar, the structure, it's identical. And yet, the traditional take on why you shouldn't do these things is actually surprisingly different for each one.
Okay, first, let's get into the conventional answer. This is probably the one you've heard 1,000 times. And this whole interpretation really boils down to one single concept: hypocrisy.
So the traditional view, and we're talking about theological heavy hitters like St. Augustine and John Calvin, basically argues that Jesus' main target here isn't the public act of charity itself. Nah, the real problem, they say, is your motive. The core issue is that desire for human glory, for people to see you and think you're great. So if you follow that logic, as long as your heart is in the right place, public charity is totally permissible.
But, and here's where the puzzle really starts to get interesting, what happens if we take that same logic, that it's all about the motive logic, and we apply it consistently to that other verse, the one about prayer?
And this right here is the critical point. If motive is the only thing that matters, then the command against vain repetitions isn't really about the act of repeating words at all. It's about the belief that saying more words will get you a better answer from God. So if you just get rid of that belief, well, then repetitive prayer should be totally fine, right? The thing is, most commentators would say no, and that is the inconsistency we're talking about.
So, how do we solve this? Well, this brings us to a new thesis, a really elegant solution that's been called the secrecy factor.
The secrecy factor basically argues that Jesus isn't just giving us a helpful tip to avoid being prideful. No, it's way more than that. He's issuing a direct command. In this view, secrecy isn't just a means to an end, it is the end. It's a fundamental principle that actually defines what real, authentic worship is supposed to look like.
And this image helps capture that core idea perfectly. The argument is that God himself operates from a secret place, and for us to truly connect with him, our worship has to mirror that hidden nature. It has to be private, personal, and completely away from the public eye.
Okay, so that's the big idea. Now, let's actually look at how the argument is built using the text itself.
This interpretation draws a really sharp line between Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 6. In Matthew 5, you get that famous command to let your light shine, which is all about a specific kind of public witness, like miracles, things that are meant to be seen. But Matthew 6, well, that's talking about something else entirely. It's about private worship, your giving, your praying, your fasting, which, according to this view, absolutely must stay hidden.
You can also break down Jesus' command here, like a simple plan of action. Step 1, what's the issue? It's the public performance of charity. Step 2, what's the root cause? It's hypocrisy, that desire to be seen and praised. So step 3, what's the mandated action? What's the fix? It's not, hey, check your heart. It's a specific external action. Absolute secrecy.
And this is such a powerful point. I mean, think about it. If Jesus' only goal here was to fix our internal motives, he would have said something like, when you give, just make sure you guard your heart against pride. But he doesn't say that, does he? He commands an external action. Secrecy so complete that your left hand literally doesn't know what your right hand is doing.
So, what's the big takeaway here? What does all of this actually mean? Well, the implications of this interpretation are huge. It suggests that the very path to God is what's at stake.
If we follow this line of thinking, hypocrisy suddenly stops being just a simple character flaw, a moral failing that we should try to work on. It becomes something far more dangerous.
And here's the really powerful conclusion from this viewpoint. Hypocrisy is spiritually deadly. Why? Because when you turn a private act of devotion into a public performance, you're not just being a little prideful. You are, quite literally, walking off the designated path that leads to communion with God.
So the danger isn't just about getting the wrong reward, getting praise from people instead of from God. The real spiritual danger is that by seeking a human audience, you are physically pulling yourself away from that secret place where that divine communion is even possible. You're trading a private audience with God for a public one. And in doing so, you lose the very connection you were supposed to be seeking in the first place.
And that leaves us with a really provocative final question to chew on. This entire interpretation challenges so much of our conventional thinking. It suggests that for these core acts of devotion, charity, prayer, fasting, being unseen isn't just a good idea to keep you humble, it's the entire point. Does true worship require being unseen? It's definitely a question worth thinking about.